Hi, I wanted to talk to you about times when we're in a situation where there's something big coming up, like an election in your country, or whether there's a war going on, or whether there's some kind of personal crisis in your life. And I just want to address a few issues that may be of concern at this time for you. We are in a collective. We are really beings of sensitivity. That's why you're in this course. And so what happens is that you will absorb what's going on in the collective. And when there's something big going on in the collective, like a big election or a war or anything else, whether it's in your country or someone else's country, if there's enough people on the planet that are feeling anxiety about what's happening, if it's shifting the consciousness of humanity, if it is challenging your belief system and challenging your understanding of what the world is and should be, then you will not be alone. And the more of you that there are who feel this way, the more the sensitives that we are will be feeling it. Along with solar flares and various other things, astrological transits, there's all sorts of waves of difficulty that arrive in our lives at various times. So this is kind of a crisis bonus session, really. Just how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the what ifs? Because it is really about the what ifs, because we don't know what's to come in any situation, do we? We know what is, we know what has been, but we don't know what is to come. I've been through a few of these kind of crisis moments throughout the world at times. And I remember I lived in South Africa, as I've mentioned to you probably in the masterclass. But I was living there during apartheid at a time when there wasn't any hope in any direction that would ever change. And I was a documentary photographer, and I was working in Soweto, and I was working in various other places throughout the country, and I did a lot of traveling. I was working for UNISA, the University of South Africa, was a correspondence university. So at the time, Nelson Mandela was training through it, and various other people, many people, because it was accessible to many people in the country. There was no limits about who could and couldn't attend the university. And it was correspondence, so it meant that people didn't actually have to arrive at the location itself. So it was much more open to people. And I was working in the photography department, which was a more liberal department. And what happened was we were living within a regime that was extremely oppressive and very, very wrong. And I saw some terrible experiences of violence and abuse and extreme racism that was really heartbreaking. And being there as documenter, trying to photograph it, was very painful because, but being sensitive, it was very hard for me to observe the difficulties that were going on around me. I then worked in the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco years later, and I also saw the horrors that were existing, the war that was going on with AIDS at the time. And I was working in San Francisco General Hospital, which was a free hospital, or relatively free. It was a hospital for everybody, as much as they could provide. And so most of my clients were homeless, drug addicted, and a lot of them were psychiatric. So I was in the war zone then. I was in the war zone in South Africa. I had some experiences in South Africa where the police were after me at one point, and my boyfriend's sister's car was car bombed because we were opposed to the apartheid regime at the time. So I've had my fair share of observing things. And I also went to Germany before the war came down, and also went to East Germany at one point. And so I saw a lot of what was going on there. I've also visited Russia in my late teens, early 20s, when there was a harsh reality of life there, extreme poverty. So I've seen a lot of what humans can do to each other, and very, very frightening and awful what we can do to each other. And it's got to a point now on Earth where it's almost like all the shadow is there to be available for all mankind to witness. Nothing is really hidden anymore. Everything is being revealed. And that's all part of the astrology that we're seeing. Everything is being revealed. So the worst perhaps is yet to come. The worst maybe is happening now. I don't know. But I am always of the belief that there are greater guides and there is a divine force that is helping us through and also helping humanity grow up, because we really are in a state of kind of teenageness where we're rebelling and angry and we don't trust anyone and we don't believe anyone and we want to do our own thing, and all those kind of narcissistic traits that teenagers have of fighting away and wanting to break away from what has been in existence, what has been the establishment, whether it's colonialism, whether it's gender issues, whatever it is, we're going to break away from it. We've got to have something new. And I think that's a lot behind what's happening in the world right now, is that just people are trying to break down the systems, and part of it is coming from a very evil place, and part of it's coming from a place of misguidedness, and part of it's coming from a place of genuine wanting change. So we don't know where the cards are going to fall. We really don't. But I do believe in that divine force. And when you are facing some severe crisis or other, either in your own life or around the world, and feeling it, then, and you know, you've got this deep breath of like, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, you're not quite in a shock state, but you're in a fear, absolute fear, and just watching what's unfolding and like, what is going to happen, when are we going to have peace, when are we going to have ease, when are the solutions going to arrive? Because right now it seems like whatever solution is not going to be the answer. So we haven't broken through yet. So it's also like giving birth, that process of giving birth, where the mother is just like, oh, just another push through, I've got to push through. And it's like the pain is absolutely unbearable. And yet at the end of it, a beautiful baby arrives. And so we're all hoping for that beautiful baby. We're waiting for that beautiful baby. But there are no, that's saying there are no atheists down a foxhole. I really believe that. If you're really facing danger, then we have no choice but to look to spirit, to God, to the goddess, to the unbounded one, to the mother, the great father, to divinity, whatever word you have for it, and recognize all the ways in which that incredible force has turned up in our lives. And the idea that the pentacle provides us with, the pentacle, which is the five-pointed star, that it points upwards when you're working with the light. In other words, it's saying your will, divine will, not our will. The humankind don't have a whole picture. We don't understand what's going to be right or what's going to be wrong. It's very hard to ask humans really to vote based on what? We don't have the full knowledge. What are we voting on? But it's always for me a heart-based vote, and sometimes I'm disappointed and sometimes I'm not. And it goes to a place where what feels like caring, what feels like loving, what feels like a place to put your cards, to put your tick, to put your hope in a whoever's guiding, whoever's ruling, that is going to do something that is loving and caring. What is that about? You know, where is that place? Where is that best place? And it's not always easy to know. And it's not always easy to decide which countries are right either, because we don't have the right information. We don't have the full picture. We know that there's a lot of bias in the media. There's a lot of bias on the internet. It's like, who do we believe? It's so hard. So I just ask you at this time and all times that you're facing your own personal crisis or a universal crisis in you know, for the planet. It's like, you know, we cannot separate ourselves from nature. We cannot separate ourselves from nature. The four elements, which is something that is used particularly in any kind of shamanic tradition, witchcraft, shamanism, even, you know, using astrology. So there are four elements. The elements are actually made up of earth, air, fire and water. They are substances that are nature. So we have to look to nature as to what is the right thing for nature, and also what is the right thing, what feels right to our hearts. And ultimately, to just recognize that if we have the clear intent of we want to do the right thing by nature, number one, it's the air we breathe, it's the water we drink, and by our communities, that's number one. We want to take care of each other as much as possible. We want to provide for each other when we have extra. We want to heal others when we have capacity to do so. So, those things, compassion is always at the helm of everything that we do. And just behind that compassion is the knowledge that we are always supported, always supported. So, no matter what happens in elections, in outcomes of war, in our own personal trials and tribulations, the outcomes may not feel like they are the outcomes we want them to be. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But if they aren't, we need to remember very firmly that there is some guiding force, and that, we are being shown our lessons and we need to learn them not only individually, but as a human species. So take care today. I hope you are all doing well. And remember as well that there are plenty of opportunities for growth and learning and development, and take joy and nourishment in your own spiritual growth, because that is probably the most important thing once we've taken care and fed and loved our families. So be well and much love.